we're going to try this again. Got a little rain outside. This is part 2. I was just kind of doing some channeling about the earth and our bodies. So welcome if you haven't seen these videos. If you didn't watch part 1, I would suggest it if you feel guided to watch it. I'm actually going to move from that though into what I was kind of being guided to talk about as well. So it'll be a little light language, a little, yeah, all of the above. We have our grackles in the background. So what I'm being guided to kind of share is that these earth, just to kind of recap from what I was saying, from what I was being guided to share, is that we're so intrinsically connected with earth, and the more separation that we get into, the more anxiety that we feel. So I'm going to go into that a little bit, because what my guides were essentially saying was that the earth has what we need, yet many of us are ignoring that and turning to man-made things, thinking that we know better, chemicals know better. And in truth, that's not true. It can be true. It can be a form of truth. It can be a variation of truth. And as we know, our indigenous family had all of these solutions to many different ailments, and they've just been some are still around and some of us still use them, but many people find it much easier to pop a pill, to create a band-aid. For what I was saying in the last video was that it doesn't, what my guides are basically saying, one of the biggest causes of our ailments is that separation though. The separation from the earth, and I'll just kind of go back into that flow. For when we do not feel in unification and oneness with our planetary mother, with our own bodies, there creates a separation that essentially blocks certain communications. It blocks certain nutrients and true inner chemicals from interacting in the way that they were meant to. I'm seeing it's like putting a dam, in a river. It reroutes it. And, well, sometimes that can be useful. It can also be detrimental to the entire ecosystem together. And I was talking about this in the last video about the ecosystem, and I'm seeing a reference that I will be moving into about the ego system in just a moment. And so while we were sharing all of these similarities between the human body and Mother Earth and the deep relationship that we all agreed to participate in, many of us have forgotten to participate in equality and balance with Mother Earth. Many see Mother Earth as useful for her resources, and that's where it ends. And many see Earth as useful for her resources and do not see her as a living entity. And we must realize at some point that she most assuredly is an entity. For how else does dirt magically grow plants that nourish your own ecological system? And although much of this is a form of magic, if you will, aka science, we invite you to recognize that when this lack of interaction, and I was saying in my last video how if the fascia, for example, is disconnected, or if the mushrooms over here, I think Rush does a song about it, the trees, like the oaks and the maples are fighting. It's the same thing. And yes, the ancestors speak of this often. Yet, often is not enough. To actively participate is the key. Walking on the sand, walking on the grass, we may not consider that as a tool, or we may not consider that as a nourishment, a form of nourishment. We may not even consider that at all. Some do not like the feel of sand between their toes or grass underneath their feet. Yet we would say that that is one minor disconnect that once that has major impact is what I'm saying, what I'm seeing. For the electricity that the body moves through it, so to speak, also moves through the earth. And the currents, I was talking about the Schumann resonance in the last video, the currents that earth is producing is helping us to counteract the currents that man is producing. So there's a lot of people, what I'm being shown, that are like, oh no, we're destroying our planet. I'm being guided that the planet will fix itself. That doesn't mean that we'll be here while she fixes herself. However, if we all start to connect with her and create this unionship, which was meant to be, and when I say unionship, I'm being guided to play with that a little bit and remind everybody that we're on a ship. Mother Earth is our ship. From one perspective, she is a vessel. She is a vehicle that moves. She's not just suspended in space. And just like we are inside of our own vessel, walking, talking, and communicating with it. We use this vessel to hold our light. We do not fight against our vessel, which I'm being shown that many of us do. Many of us fight. We know we should eat this, but we eat that instead. We know we should exercise, but we don't. We know we should get outside and ground, but we choose to binge on electronics instead. And I'm just being reminded over and over and over again, get back to the basics. Keep it simple to counteract the overcomplicating that has occurred, that is still occurring, and the senseless destabilization that this creates, this disconnect. So let us bring it back into separation anxiety, for this is how we ended the last transmission. When we have this lack of continuity, I'm seeing an electrical circuit that is not ending, it's just kind of frying itself out. Grounding is part of what helps reset our electric circuitry in our bodies. When we have a disconnect from our circuitry or our motherboard, so to speak, whether inside our own circuitry motherboard, our own skin suit technology, or outside, which is Mother Earth's as the motherboard, we do not recognize that there really is no true separation. For without her air, without her ether, plasma, water, soil, plants, we would not exist in this technology. Our technology would malfunction and break down, as many are finding currently in our current situation. What we are seeing playing out in the collective is a direct reflection of the I'm hearing many different layers here, like this objective to objectify artificiality creates more separation. False evidence appearing real also creates separation. And in the last video, I talked about fear. Like, the mushrooms aren't afraid of the trees. They are like, oh, okay, you need this. Okay, let me branch out through this fungal network, mycelium, and connect to this forest over there on the other side of the country so that we can all communicate as one. Yet so one of the things I love, Dan Winters talks about drought and how it's a lack of charge and it's created because of imbalance. And I was talking about how if our fascia in our body doesn't have moisture, it can't absorb the water. It just beads off, so to speak, and it doesn't absorb the nutrients. Many of us are looking to expand and to ascend and to evolve, whatever those labels are. But we have to get back to the basics too, because ultimately there's a deeper disconnect that's happening within this whole network that we're really, really being guided to recognize. And so within these layers, these economics, if you will, these economics of our body and our interaction with Mother Earth, we create a relationship. I'm hearing, we got a relationship. I'm hearing sublime. A sublime relationship. Yet when that relationship is cut off, when there is no communication, when there is no interaction, or when the interaction is 1/16 of our daily activities, there becomes separation anxiety. This creates an anxiousness within our cellular mycelium network, for it is no longer connected to the motherboard, our Earth Mother. It is no longer connected, and this creates a feeling of instability within the body, for they are intrinsically connected, as I was saying in the last video. This disconnection then reverberates through the cells, for we are the cells on Mother Earth, from one perspective. It creates a disconnect and a discord, an unharmonious interaction within the whole system, within the whole network. And while we may feel the need to counter this with certain activities that are artificial activities, this is only a band-aid that covers up and further creates a padding between the electrical connection. It muffles it, so to speak. It dummies it down, as one might say. This creates a further disconnect from the micro to the macro. While this is obvious to many, this is not obvious to many. Many scientists looked at our indigenous ancestors. Not all scientists. I was going to talk about Dan Winters. Just watch his videos; they're amazing. If you feel guided, I was guided to watch his videos, and somebody had introduced me. You got to watch Dan Winters. This is what you're writing about. He's not one of those scientists that has that disconnect. What I'm seeing, though, is a lot of scientists are so in their heads. They're showing me a picture of them in a laboratory, all covered up, working with chemicals. And while there's nothing wrong with that, for chemicals are meant to be alchemized, oftentimes, there tends to only be this focus. When one cell in the body only focuses on that area, dis-ease happens. I'm hearing it's a disruption in the whole system, for the whole system is meant to work together. The organs communicate with each other. The brain does not. I'm seeing the heart especially, like the lungs are required in order to send oxygen to the whole body. It's not like we just breathe in and it just goes into our lungs. It goes into all of our body. Our cells need the oxygen in order to operate and function. It truly is a living biological ecosystem within our bodies, and Mother Earth is no different. Yet these two are intrinsically connected. We bring this to your awareness this, and it may seem like old information, but many scientists are choosing to ignore this and dissect it to see how they can manipulate it to bring it into an artificial world or mechanism. And while this can be useful for many operations, and we are certainly not discrediting these many operations, I'm seeing like somebody loses an arm, you know, they might need help with that, through a robotic limb. But I'm also being shown that we haven't even really gotten to the point to discover that we can regrow our limbs. I mean, I'm just being shown this. I don't really know how physically as a person in this now moment, but I'm seeing it as a possibility and a probability. I'm being guided I'm being shown that it's already been done. So our scientists already know how to do it, is what I'm being shown. I'm being shown that I'm sure people are going to probably say med beds. I guess that's a thing. I don't really know much about that whole subject. I do know about Therify through Dan Winters, and I'm sure there's a lot of technology that's been pushed aside because of our need to. So I'm being shown how the separation anxiety, it creates a feeling of disconnect, and essentially it makes us feel fearful, because it creates literally an anxiety. Because if you've got if you've ever seen after a storm and there's an electricity that's a live wire, it's not grounded. So if we're walking around like live wires, it's this constantly feeling of being buzzed, which is heightening our cortisol, which is creating anxiety, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Fear. Is fear creating that, or are we creating fear? I mean, it's they work intrinsically. We invite you to expand out what it is we're speaking of to the ecosystem, to the ego system, and to the system of our social economic world. For there is certainly a disconnect that is happening, and many are aware of this. Yet we invite you to see all of the sublets within these particular ecosystems. For within these sublets, we have world views, we have opinions, we have sectors, within the sections, within the separation that separates this and separates that. And while this could be seen as a neurological system that has many synapses, and we could call all of our separations as multiple synapses that are still glued to a network of humanity, this disconnect is also within the human genome, so to speak. Okay, this is a play on words. I'm being shown several things. Number one, the humanity is so separated and so disconnected from each other through separation. But this is also a play on words, as above, so below, as within, so without. We're trying to do so much work with the genes, we're missing the bigger picture. I've been shown that DNA isn't just in our bodies, it's all around us. It's outside of us, yet there's nothing outside of us, all is one. But for this reality, there is a sense of separation because we have the ego that we're in the process of integrating, so that we can see, all right, this is my home, this is where I live, this is your home, and this is where you live. I own this car, and you own this car, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to get in your car and drive it, and then I'm going to go to your place of work and do your job. So that is, yes, that is separation that we have agreed to create in order to live in this particular ecosystem. Society, social system, it's a network, a system. And that too is in the process of reworking itself. But more importantly, what I'm seeing is the fact that it's like this cell mitosis, this split, and so we're dissecting everything and creating this left brain analytical field in which the hemispheres are not connecting. We're creating human and earth in which they aren't connecting. We're creating DNA over here as not necessarily connected to all of this. So when I say creating DNA, I mean pulling it apart and just picking it apart until we're trying to figure out the atom within the when it's all fractal is the thing, is what I'm being shown. We are trying to fractionate the fractal. And when you fractionate the fractal, it messes with the whole system, because that's not how it's supposed to work. It becomes a finite, artificial creation that loses its luminosity, is what I'm hearing. Voluminous luminosity. It shrinks itself. We are being invited to see this within our own selves, within our own, not only physical form, but our own relationships. For the relationship that we are being invited to reconnect with Mother Earth, and the relationship we are being invited to remember with our own bodies, we are also being invited to remember this with one another and humanity. For humanity as a whole does not work by itself. So, for example, I'm being shown one person can live by themselves in the mountains, living off the land. Yes, that can work. But what I'm also being shown is it's not, when we work and come together as a community, it actually creates a deeper, more expansive network that is stronger. So of course we keep hearing that saying, you know, we're stronger together, we're in this together, but yet what I'm being shown is there's so much separation though. One of the catchy hashtags that everybody's been using is Starseeds Unite, and I'm being guided to talk about this. Okay, so I'm going to go into flow about that. And we speak this language. And some may call these lost languages of lost civilizations. Some may say this language was carried over from Lemurian. Some may say some of the languages that we speak, and I say we, when I say we, I'm seeing all these versions of me, past, present, future, my highest self, my oversoul, parallels, my guides. And I was guided that, like, for example, Arcturian is like sound, it's song. It's not like formed words from my perspective. For example, there's all kinds of languages, but when we start to separate them and say that this is where I'm from, this is where I'm from, this language is bad, this language is good, this religion is bad, this religion is good, this particular sector, this moves us into further separation. And this is an old story. This is an old, I'm hearing history rewrites itself. And let us expand on that a bit. History rewrites itself. For his story, someone else's story, from their own memory, from actions that had taken place. So I'm saying, okay, there was a war, for example, and everybody that was in it has a different perspective because of what their roles were. But overall, one group or collective will remember it being bad, for example. Of course, war is not good. If we're going to label things as bad or good, it's separation, it's raw. It's pulling apart. We all have different perspectives, for we all have different components within our DNA architecture that sets us apart from one another. Yet we play on this, for you are all a part, and you are all playing a part. We are all playing a part of the whole. And the more we understand this, the less we need to nitpick at one another's structure. The less we feel the need to tear down another version of us. the less we feel a need to, tell someone else they are not sovereign, but we are. And we speak to many of those who would be teachers. I'm being guided as I say this. I've done this, guys. When I first started doing this work, I'm going to do another video, by the way, I'm being guided to do about work and what that means. So I'll do that next for me, from my own perspective. But when I first started doing this work, I really was like, this is how you need to do it, based on my own experience. And I would be frustrated sometimes because people wouldn't do it. And then I realized that was my own ego wanting to help them. And ultimately I recognized that that was their choice. As a sovereign being, even if they did a session with me and I worked with someone for 6 months and I saw changes, and I'd say things like, have you been doing this as my suggestion? Well, no, I don't feel like I should have to. Okay. So I would get frustrated as a human, as a teacher, teaching my own way, my own view, from my own perspective. But as the years have gone by, I'm realizing more and more, which is part of the reason I took a bunch of time off, that what is my perspective? Who am I to tell someone else or to teach someone else what they should be doing? So I had to really, and I'm still in that process of, it's not about that anymore. I can tell and share with someone what I've done that's worked for me, but it isn't my job or business to dictate to someone else how they should behave. How they should behave, or how they should be, who they should be getting involved with, or what their belief system is. And it's not to say I feel like I've always been very open, because I see things from many different perspectives. That doesn't mean I see things from all perspectives, even though I really am in that space where that is one of my visions, is to be able to see things from all angles. And oftentimes I will, which makes things challenging too, because then I go, wait a minute, that person is me. So it's that many of us as teachers see other people doing things that are not necessarily beneficial for the entire network, the entire root system. And so it creates this kind of rotted root, is what I'm hearing. I think I channeled about that a while ago, this rusted root. And it creates root rot. And then that light doesn't get to that tree because they've separated themselves. But what I'm being shown is we as teachers, so to speak, I don't even consider myself a teacher. I consider myself a human on a human journey, sharing my experiences in the way that I know how to. And if somebody benefits from it, or feels good, or better, or maybe has an aha, or just has fun with it, then so be it. And as many of us as healers, and this is another subject to go into, because I'm being guided to go back into where I was at. But many of us as healers, I'm not healing somebody else. I am providing a space in which that other person is healing themselves. Yet I am offering a vibration or frequency in which they're opening up to that is essentially what they're already capable of. The difference is I'm just providing that door, or that doorway, or that corridor for us to connect, right? And that's how these healings happen for many of us. That's how distance energy work works. It's just energy. So I'm holding that space. But in the beginning, there was a sense of separation when I first started doing this, because I would put the responsibility on me to heal that other person. To one extent, I would take it personally if it didn't work, or if they would be healed and then they would come back and say, well, I need more healing, over and over and over again. I'd say, well, what am I doing wrong? When in reality, that just might be something they enjoyed. It just feels good to have an energy session for whatever reason. The same reason I go get acupuncture, right? Anyways, I digress, because I'm sharing this because I know there's a lot of healers and teachers out there that are kind of going through this shuffle. Things are being reshuffled, and many of us aren't sure where we stand. But what my guides are essentially saying is stand on Mother Earth, stand with Mother Earth, and stand together as humans. And even this whole concept of starseed. So I guess I'm moving into the energy update. What I'm being shown is, and I'll go into this flow a little bit, the starseed community there is a separation going on in the starseed community. So we say starseeds unite, but then I see across the board there is a lot of projection going on. And I've done it, right? I'm a human being or a starseed, a hybrid, as a human, whatever we want to label ourselves as. But I've recognized I had to ask myself, is that coming from ego? Am I projecting my view of what this person should or should not be doing? Am I projecting my view of what a starseed is? Or what this particular belief system is? And the more I expand out through this process from one perspective, the more perspectives I get to play with. So perhaps I felt when I was younger there was only one book, the one book to rule them all. And there were no other books. And then I was introduced to other books that were older than that book. And I went, well, I didn't even know this existed. And when that happens, doesn't it kind of throw us off? Like, well, that changes everything. Well, if that means this, then what is this? It changes the meaning of the original book, whatever book that is, fill in the blanks. For some people, it's, the Tao. Some people, it's the Bible. Some people, it's Siddhartha and Buddha's work. And for others, it's, I could go on and on. Whatever book that is that we read when we were younger, where we were just like, this is it. And I'm certainly not saying that all of those books aren't extremely important and valuable. But there's different sectors and subsets within each of those that teach this angle and teach that angle. And this person says, well, my angle is better than your angle because of X, Y, and Z. And from their perspective, they're right. But this person says, nope, my angle is slightly more to this direction and this geometry, therefore your angle is not right. And in their mind, they're right. So this creates anxiety. It creates tension. And it creates a further separation. And the words that are coming through, so I'm just going to go back into flow about this. Many of us have a tendency to break down things in order to further see into the components and how they work. And this is a beautiful way, as a scientist or perhaps an engineer and a logical person would find